Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ask the Experts. I'm joined here by Jack Otter, executive editor of CBSMoneyWatch.com. And our special guest star today is Dan Kadlec, blogger extraordinaire from CBSMoneyWatch.com, a longtime columnist with Time and, of course, the Great Money Magazine, or formerly Great Money Magazine. Author of a new book called With Purpose that he wrote with Ken Dykewald. Welcome, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
Good. Well, today's subject is family finance. Oh, then there's me. I'm Eric Schurenberg. I'm the editor-in-chief of this website, and I'm standing in for Jill Schlesinger. You'll probably have noticed that your host today is not female and considerably shorter than our usual hostess. But our subject today is family finance. We've got Dan, whose blog, I should add, is named The Bank of Dad. He's an expert on money and kids. Jack is merely an expert on kids, having two.
Not a good financial move, as Dan knows.
Yeah, I know.
As
right.
you know, too, yeah.
Yes, that's right. Having kids proves you're no expert on money. But we're all that, so families are something that we deal with every day. We have a bunch of questions from people who have families and who have money, generally not enough of the latter, maybe too much of the former. We can get right to the questions that you have sent in, and also you're free to participate by sending in questions to our live chat at moneywatch.bnet.com. With no further ado, let's get down to these questions that people have been pounding on our doors to find out the answers to. First one is from Anonymous, and talk about the kinds of family issues that crop up with money. It's actually not Anonymous, but she's asked us to keep her name secret just to avoid family problems, and you'll soon see why.
You can see why.
Yeah. My husband's daughter is 23 years old and a professional college student. That's not a good start. She costs us about $12,000 a year in expenses, not counting tuition, which is covered by loans. She took a year off and lived at home, and then began attending a university. My husband, until I totaled it up for him, had no idea how much he was taking out of our bank account. Her father and I would like her to assume responsibility for her own expenses. What suggestions do you have about how to work with a college student who's never been asked to live on a budget, never been asked to take responsibility for her financial life? And how do we make her financially independent? We're not going to let her starve, but Anonymous's patience is clearly running out. Dan, classic boomerang kid case, this time thrown in a little bit of a twist because she's also a professional college student.
Well, she's too old for a spanking, but she needs a jolt of reality. Someone who's never really been asked to budget or take care of themselves this way, I think you have to start slow. Okay, so let's start there. You can't just go cold turkey. What you want to do with her is put her on some kind of a budget, explain how much you're going to give and for what purposes, and as quickly as possible get her to start paying for her wants. You may take care of her needs for a while longer, and you slowly want to wane her from that as well. But I think the trick is to start slow. Cold turkey would just create all kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm.
I want to jump in there. It took me a second to figure out what you meant. You meant get her to pay for the things that she wants, but not necessarily rent or tuition, the things that she can't live without. But as quickly as possible, tell her the smoothies are on her.
The smoothies are on her. Yeah. You can pick up more of the tuition if you want. But I think she also needs to show some initiative. And if she doesn't have a job, a part-time job, maybe you get to that pretty quickly.
Sure, absolutely. I was struck by the way this was worded, Eric. It said, she costs us about $12,000 a year in expenses. This relationship has soured a bit when someone refers to their children that way.
Yes. What about the college? I mean, theoretically, the student is training for a future life, and getting a college education isn't something that parents should support, but it's been going on for a couple years longer than usual. How do you wean someone from that?
Well, you might, I don't know what the loan situation is here, but you might make her responsible for her own loans. At 23, she's certainly eligible. The loans can be put in her name, and then maybe you talk to her about what this is going to cost down the road as she's paying the money back. and get her to think about money that way. But that might be a step. Put the loans in her name.
And to take a page out of Dan's book, Dan, I suspect that when you start sort of weaning her off of the trough and into budgeting, you would give her a lump sum of money and say, this is it for the next 2 months, 3 months, however long you want to do it, and make her figure out how to make that money last.
Right. I mean, generally speaking, I think the older a child is, the bigger and more infrequent the amounts should be. So instead of, $100 a month, $400 every 4 months or whatever your number is, and make them responsible for budgeting.
Right. And the hard part, as you've pointed out many times in Bank of Dad, is to stick to it.
No bailouts.
Right.
Yeah, no, but this is the age-old. It's the whole question of allowance. It just doesn't work if you soften and bail them out. You got to stick with it.
All right, Anonymous. Good luck with that family situation. Here's a budgeting question. This comes from David. Because I work in the insurance industry, my annual bonus can vary greatly year to year depending on the frequency and severity of natural disasters such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and tornadoes. Now, I'd like to work on establishing a household budget for the next 3 years based on what I believe my salary and bonus may be. I've looked at various software programs to help me project my household budget, including Quick and Deluxe, but I haven't found one that's user-friendly. Can you suggest a software program that's easy to use and not on the high end of the cost spectrum? Jack, what do you think?
I'm holding it right here in my hand. Yeah. I've played around with Quicken and Mint and some of these others, and I really didn't find that they added value. It's a spreadsheet, and I type this stuff in, but frankly, the yellow pad and the pen, you write down all your expenses. The best way, the easiest way to do it really is to spend a month or 2 or 3 doing this. Make sure you get everything down, add it up, and then just do the math. You multiply the mortgage times 12 and the quarterly payments times 4, and you just figure out what your costs are. And Dan's needs versus wants is a great place to start. There's certain things that he's got to have, and he's going to figure out what that is. He's going to add the mortgage to, for some people, cable is a need. For some people, it's a want. Electricity is a need. Smoothies are a want. And you divide that up, and so you figure out, okay, this is my base. I got to have this. And so if we have no natural disasters, good for us, bad for Dave, he's going to need a second job to cover those needs. And then if not, he does okay, but he's still got to separate the two. And probably savings is a need, not a want. One thing that a lot of people do is they have their monthly payments and they save whatever's left over. But really, when you're in the budgeting process, you ought to consider about retirement savings, emergency fund, that sort of thing as a need. And then after you've already put that in the ING account or wherever it's going, then you think about the wants and you pay what you can. But I'm sorry not to be a little flip there, but I just have found that for future budgeting, these software programs they don't help me that much, at least.
Right. And for what it's worth, there are a million calculators on the web. Just go to Google and type in calculator, mortgage, calculator, retirement, anything you want. And they're not going to give you precise numbers, but you can at least get a feel for how you should be thinking about this stuff.
Well, unlike you guys, I'm pretty impressed by software. Maybe I'm just too easy to be impressed. I was a Quicken fanatic for a while. I just found maybe just there's something psychological about being able to enter something into a computer and know that the arithmetic was right. It just made it all seem much more valid than pencil and paper. And if David is that sort of guy, then there are a couple programs that did get pretty good reviews on the web. One is called YNAB, stands for You Need a Budget. And it is software that's dedicated to that very purpose of helping you create a budget and stick to it, blending it in with the bank and categorizing your spending and things like that, allowing you to make adjustments for overspending in one category and spilling over into another. Now, David's particular problem, of course, is he doesn't know really what his income is going to be. He does know what his expenses are going to be. And I think that when you're in that situation, one of the things you have to do is estimate very low on the income and build up a reserve so that you have some cushion when things go bad, if they go bad in the next couple of years.
The way things have been going recently, he's in a great business.
Yeah.
All we need are locusts. I mean, it's been pretty bad in terms of natural disasters.
Well, I think it's not so good for his bonus when there are disasters.
Well, it hurts the insurance company. I figure he's writing more policies, but maybe not.
Well, maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. He doesn't really say what, only that it fluctuates. Let's move on to Carol, who's got a question about allowances. She's come to the right place. What's the best way to handle allowances for kids who are 8 and 6? I want to teach them good spending and saving habits. Should I start them both at the same time? Pay them differently? They already do chores. I don't want them to do housework, but how do I qualify what I pay them? My husband wants to just give them the same amount with no reasoning behind it. There are other issues in this family finance here that I can see. What do you think, Dan?
Well, the key with allowance is defining what the money is for. So, as a rule of thumb, you might start with $1 per week per year they are. So at 6 years old, $6 a week. 8 years old, $8 a week. I would double that as they get to be later teens. 13, 14, double it to whatever that is. But
there are calculators for that.
But underlying all of it is a clear understanding of what the money is for. So if it's for clothes, if it's for gasoline, if it's for other sort of necessary things, you need to give more. But if it's just for candy, then you need to give less. But the trick is make it clear what they're responsible for and what this money is for, and no bailouts.
Yeah. At 6 and 8, you probably don't have to worry about this so much, but later you do. Is you want to have an allowance, I would think, that is sort of the community standard. So if it's $1 a year, is a good rule of thumb, but maybe in, a rich place like Park Slope or Brooklyn Heights, it's a lot higher than that, and you don't want to go to school with less milk money than your neighbors, or is that unnecessarily materialistic?
No, I think that's fair. But again, it really comes down to what the money's for. That the kid who might be getting twice what you're getting maybe has to pay for all their clothes where you don't. Maybe they're paying for their car insurance and you're not. So that's really what it comes down to.
Allowance for chores or not?
I'm against it. I know a lot of people are for it. It's roughly 50-50 split among people that think about this stuff, whether you should pay for them or not. I know, Susie Orman, for example, she believes you should be paid. You should have to earn your allowance. I think really that the two are separate. I think chores are part of being a family, and it's part of the responsibility you have to the family that you don't necessarily have to be paid for that. I do like the idea of offering kids additional chores that aren't their normal responsibility and paying them for that. Give them a chance to earn a little something extra.
Good.
I agree with that, although, and exactly the point. I think you kind of split the difference by saying, look, we need to paint the garage this summer. I'll pay you a little extra for doing that.
Good. In fact, there is research, as I saw in this blog right here, that shows that paying people, this is Dan's blog, that paying kids for good money habits actually works.
That was a very cool study about, I don't remember it exactly, but someone proved that if you pay kids to eat their vegetables when they're 5, they will eventually learn to love their vegetables. And what I did was I kind of extrapolated that, and I think it does work. But with the vegetables, you might actually acquire a taste for it. With budgeting, it just becomes a habit. It becomes a good habit that you want to reinforce. But yeah, be a mercenary. Pay them to do it while they're early and while they're young, and maybe they'll grow up doing it without being forced.
There's a Jonathan Clemens trick that I'm planning on instituting soon. My wife doesn't know this yet, but he would offer his kids $1 each at a restaurant if they didn't have a soda, I guess, or a drink. And he saved money that way. And he taught his kids to face that little, financial conundrum. Do I want the pleasure now or the money in my bank account later? I think it sounds like a good plan.
Good. And it worked? They didn't drink soda?
Apparently not, yeah.
Good. All right. Moving on to a higher ticket item, a mortgage. My first mortgage has been modified. I've applied for a modification with my second, and the second mortgage lender has denied it and informed me there are no other options. I've come up with the monies to pay. I have to come up with the monies to pay and keep my mortgage current. They would not offer me any kind of repayment plan if I continue to let it go without pay and hoping they will approve me for a modification. Is that a good plan? Doesn't sound like a plan at all. Jack?
I am just off the phone with Billy Wright, a one-time Ask the Experts guest from Americana Mortgage in Southampton, New York. And he said actually that what happens is the second mortgage holder is not going to foreclose on you because they would have to buy out the first mortgage. So he said it's not going to happen. So unfortunately, if they're playing hardball, and he was very careful to say, I wouldn't advise this, but really your only recourse is to play hardball back, and you just stop paying. And when they realize you're serious, then there's a good chance they'll come to you with a deal. But he said just paying them a little bit, you're going to get nowhere. He said they essentially are not in a position to foreclose. And I asked him and confirmed that in fact her credit score is already shot. So that's not an issue. So unfortunately, she has to play hardball. I mean, certainly my temptation in her position would be to get a manager on the phone, say, look, here's the situation. Say, I know you're not going to foreclose on me because you have to buy out so-and-so. Here's what I've got. I'm talking to you in good faith. This is the maximum I can pay, and see what happens.
Yeah, we've always sort of preached that when you get into debt troubles, what you should do is own up to it, go to your creditor, and bring them a reasonable repayment plan, something that you can live with, and that you'll be faithful to. And generally speaking, a creditor, especially if it's a credit card, now I don't know about the mortgage situation, or the second mortgage, but certainly with a credit card, they're more likely to deal with you on that basis and say, well, look, if you owe us $300 a month, but you're saying you can pay $150, and that's your plan, and you're going to live by it. We'll take it. And maybe they'll forgive a third of the loan or whatever, because something's better than nothing from their point of view.
Yes, that's right. Actually, they will probably just extend it. They don't want to have to write down the assets on their books. Banks are particularly loath to do that these days. All right, well, good advice. Thank you. That was Billy Wright?
Billy Wright, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Kathy asks as a question about building a home in retirement. We want to build a home on the property we have. My husband retired almost 1.5 years ago. But we are agonizing about getting a 30-year mortgage at age 56 and fear our house and land will be worth less than we are paying to build. The house we want to build will cost about $300,000. Carrying costs, apart from mortgage, will be $12,000 a year. Our broker says we could run out of money. Can you provide some insight on this? Jack, what do you think?
Well, this is a very strange situation, and there's probably more information here that we don't have. But she says the lot's appraised at $148,000, and then the building at $68,000. So if they have no mortgage, or I guess that they own at least a share of that building. So my advice would be, okay, sell the property, sell whatever your share is in the building. They're going to be looking at close to $200,000. They can buy a $300,000 house, which I don't know where they live, but if that'll get them a house in their neighborhood, they're in good shape. A $100,000 mortgage is not that onerous at age 56. But do not. She's asking about tapping their 401k. I don't like that at all. I mean, I'd rather borrow the money and pay as much as you can now, and then when you're able to tap your 401k, then maybe you pull out some more and pay it off. I wouldn't even recommend that, but I'd much rather them do that than pay the penalty and taxes now.
Yeah, that's true.
See, I was reading this as a tear down. They wanted to tear down their house and build on the property they have.
Right.
And when they're done, they're going to have a $300,000 house, is the way I understood it.
I see.
And I'm not sure exactly what the concern is, but I would say if you're 56 and you're doing this now, I wouldn't worry too much about what the house is going to be worth later on in the resale market, if that's a concern here, which it seemed to me that maybe it was. You're going to live there the rest of your life, I assume, if you're building the house at 56 and going through all this. So I wouldn't worry too much about the resale market. I'd also think about waiting 3 years when you can pull that money out without the penalty.
My rule of thumb on this would be not to go into debt when you're this close to when you're 56 for 30 years. Owning a house is, it's a goal for a lot of people, but you don't have to do it, and it tends to be overrated. And when you get a $300,000 house, you'll have whatever the mortgage will be on that, and the carrying costs. It's something you can't get out of easily. You can't adjust your expenses very easily if you have a big nut like that. That is definitely a need, not a want. and you don't have a lot of income and therefore don't have a lot of flexibility. So I think twice about that. Selling with the property as it is would advance that nest egg, which seems to be, according to their broker, kind of on the low end anyway. And you'd be able to carry that into retirement. Stuff to think about, Kathy. The next question's from Jerry. My total income is $34,000, includes Social Security and company retirement. I have a reverse mortgage on my home, and other than that, I'm debt-free. I have $10,000 in a savings account, which I never touch. I'm concerned, though, about the safety of that money. Is there anything different I should be doing with my small savings? Is one bank any safer than another?
Well, first of all, can we applaud Jerry for having a $10,000 emergency fund? That's something most people don't have. Jerry, I love your emergency fund. I'd leave it where it is. I don't know where it is. As long as it's earning interest, I love that you're not touching it, and just treat it as money that's there in case. So I think that's great. As for your savings, I'm trying to follow this, but as long as you have FDIC insurance, I don't think it really matters what bank you're in.
No, I think that's right. If you really wanted to get the most out of that $10,000 in your savings account, you can go to a website called depositaccounts.com. Here's what it looks like, if you're pulling that up, Roland. And that will tell you where you can get the highest interest rate on an FDIC guaranteed savings account. On $10,000, it's not going to make or break you, but you'll know you're doing the most with the savings you have. And just for your information, the highest yielding savings account right now, I looked ahead on deposit accounts, is Tennessee Commerce Bank, about 1.5%. Like I said, that's that'll buy you a meal maybe at the end of the year.
You can keep track of Alan Roth's column. He follows this sort of thing. We'll tell you when rates go up a little bit. And, the one thing that he might want to worry about is inflation, because Social Security will be adjusted. I don't know whether his company retirement plan will or not. But Alan writes about I-bonds, which would be another thought for that $10,000. It's a bond that's related with, it's linked to inflation, so it will go up in value if inflation should spike.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And it won't fluctuate very much in value. Good. Moving on to the question from Paul. I'm 43 and I have $10,000 I'd like to invest. That is the sum of the day. I have some investments at SEI. I don't know whether this is smart or not. My advisor switched from dimensional funds to SEI and said I should move with him. I'm in the game for a long-term, moderate risk investment supporting my retirement. Where do you suggest I should invest this money? Dan?
Well, he sounds like he's willing to take a little risk. He's fairly young. You always want to be diversified, but for someone like this, I'm a big fan of a total market fund, an index fund that something like the Wilshire 5000 or. I think Vanguard has, the name of the Vanguard Total Market Fund. Something like that, for me, it's one-stop shopping. You don't have to think real hard about it. Your total equity exposure is in this one fund. It's broadly, globally diversified. At 43, you're probably going to leave the money there for 20 years. I'm comfortable with stocks at that point.
Jack,
and I would ask my advisor, I would point out that he's just put himself in the Vanguard Total Market Index Fund per Dan Kadlec. He's paying, 8 basis points a year? And then ask my advisor, why do I own these SEI funds that charge me about 100 basis points, at 1 percentage point a year? And they've underperformed the market. I don't really love this move from DFA to SEI. So I would definitely quiz my broker. Why are these better for me? Look at Morningstar. You'll see that they have lagged the market. So I'd want to hear some good answers on that.
Yes, I think that the question might be a little unclear about what happened. It appears to me that what happened was that the advisor went from a private financial planning firm that used DFA funds, which are funds that are very much in line with what Dan recommended. They're index-related funds, have very low costs, and use all the latest academic research to make the most efficient investment. And he moved to a company to SEI, which has mutual funds, but also has a wrap money management business, and that may be where he is. So he's in a fund company that uses actively managed, more expensive funds because that's what his advisor wants to do because his advisor thinks he can make more money, and he's probably right about that, but that doesn't mean it works better for him. So, Paul, I'd ask your advisor some questions about this. The simpler course is the one that Dan and Jack recommended, and the more expensive course is the one that your planner seems to be urging you onto. You have to find out whether that really makes sense for you. Juanita, my niece is taking a trip to Klagenfurt, Austria. Good for her. And I need to have a credit card that I can send with her. What's the best one to get?
Well, let me start with my daughter in Chile this semester. We sort of went through this. What kind of banking was she going to do while she was abroad? And I actually didn't get her one of these credit cards because she doesn't have a credit card right now, and I kind of like it that way. But but what you want to be sensitive to are the transaction fees. The main cost of a credit card overseas is the foreign currency exchange. Now, a lot of the cards have dropped these, are cut back on them, but a lot still charge them as well. And so what you want to do is that the first thing you want to look for is what they charge for an exchange, a foreign currency transaction. And there are plenty that don't have them. And I think the ones I looked at online, American Express Platinum is one of these, as well as the Citi Prestige and Premier cards. But there are others too. I mean, you can search this online and find them. But those are some good ones, and it's really the top consideration for international cards.
Yeah, Capital One is often good on that.
Right.
I got hit with fees on my Premier card. I wonder if they've changed since then. This is June a year ago.
This is as of January what I was looking at. So
rats,
I think
went on vacation at the wrong time.
There has been a lot of change in this area over the last year.
Yeah, one of the few areas in which some banks anyway, have been cutting fees rather than raising them.
Right.
But for many banks, this is still an area where they can make a lot of profit. Capital One is one of the few that has made a point of not charging excessive fees on international transactions. So maybe that's a way to go. The other way to go would be to open a checking account for your niece and use a check card. That way you can fund the card. There won't be any interest charges or anything like that. If the spending is excessive, you don't have to worry about it. You can track what she's spending. Mary asks the following. I'm 52 years old, started a 401k about 5 years ago. I make $48,000 a year and put 5% of my income into the 401k. My employer matches 4%. Is this correct for my age? Jack, what do you think?
Well, you never want to ask financial journalists that question because we're all such spoil sports on this one. Really, you should be maxing out. And we've written many times about how I don't know if she has a pension. I hope she does, but most, 17% now?
Right.
9% of people have pensions. As Eric has often written, odds are Social Security will be there despite our worries about the system, but who knows? They might cut back benefits. She's 52, so she's probably safe on Social Security, but who knows? No, frankly, we would say, no, max it out. 15%. Actually, she's not quite at the catch-up provision yet, so she can do 15%.
Right.
Plus her employer's 4 would get her 19%.
No, at 52.
50 is the catch-up.
Oh, 50,
Yeah,
okay.
so she's got another $5,500 a month, a year that she can put away. And, the problem is the catch-up and maxing out is not always easy to do. It ends up being a lot of money.
It's easy for us to say, but from a cash flow perspective, it's pretty tough to do.
But I would say this 5%, if I'm reading this right, this 5% is clearly not enough. 10% is kind of a minimum benchmark for what you should be saving. So I would ratchet that up right away and then look to max out from there.
And to Dan's calculators, there are, again, great calculators online. She can look at what she has, what kind of savings she has, predict what she will have in the future, and see where that's going to put her.
Yes, that's right. The other thing I would say is that she started the 401k only 5 years ago. This is a little late to be telling you this now, Mary, but you would want to have started a long time before that. That would be the mid-40s. You should start with your first paycheck to make it a lot easier.
If she has kids, maybe she can pass that along because the compounding over 40 years versus over 15. I'd have to do the math, but you could have 3 times as much money or more.
Yes, that's right. The annual growth on a 401k that you've been funding for 20 years is going to be much more than maxing out, than you could put in maxing out, much more than your contributions, even if you max out and got the full match. Gentlemen, we have come to the end of this Ask the Experts session. Thank you, Jack, for your all your usual wisdom on this and your great perspective. Dan, it's always good to have you.
I was happy to be here. Yeah.
All right, and folks, you can see us next week on Ask the Expert. Same time, same bad channel. I'm Eric Schurenberg, CBSMoneyWatch.com.